Now going back to the top story we are tracking here on DD India News Hour, the UN Security Council's Sanctions Monitoring Report names the Resistance Front or TRF as the group responsible for the 22nd April terror attack at Pahalgam in Jammu and Kashmir that claimed the lives of 26 civilians. The report goes on to say that the attack could not have been carried out without the support of the Pakistan-based Lashkar-e-Taiba terror group. Joining us for more is Professor Harshvardhan Pant. He is Vice President Studies and Foreign Policy of the Observer Research Foundation, a privately held think tank headquartered in New Delhi. Professor Pant, welcome to News Hour. A big diplomatic win for India?
Indeed, I think this underscores the global challenge that India faced post-Pahalgam and the way it has diplomatically been able to underscore its problems to the international community and get international community on board when it comes to this particular issue. And I think it also shows how widespread support is for what India has been saying all along, which many in this country were not particularly, were rather apprehensive about, that the world stands with India when it comes to what happened in Pahalgam. The world stands with India when it comes to terrorism. And I think in this particular case, there is also a clear link that is being drawn with Pakistan and what Pakistan supported and aided groups have been able to do in India and in Kashmir. So I think it's a big diplomatic victory. It's a big recognition that India's challenges are being seen as global challenges, and India has been successful in conveying this to a large part of the world.
If you look at the text of the document, Professor Pant, at least 2 UN member states have informed the UN Sanctions Committee that the Pahalgam attack could not have taken place without the support of the Lashkar-e-Taiba. One member state explicitly said that the TRF and LAT were synonymous. Does it not further expose Pakistan's lies and lay bare its complicity in fomenting terror against India?
Absolutely. And I think Pakistan has been living in its own delusions that somehow the world will ignore what had happened in Pahalgam, and somehow its shenanigans will be enough to draw the world's attention away from this problem. And as we are seeing, Pakistan has always been, at least for the last few decades, being seen as the epicenter of global terrorism. And that, that stigma that it carries continues with these kinds of activities that it continues to support. So I think ultimately India's global campaign against terrorism, and the way India had defined its global campaign against terrorism as a challenge, as a contest between humanism and terrorism, that has a broad appeal, and Pakistan's role in supporting groups like LAT or now the TRF continues to be a burden on Pakistan's ability to be a normal player in global politics. So whatever Pakistani diplomats and Pakistani leadership may say, ultimately Pakistan is viewed through the prism of these groups rather than as a country that is trying to come to terms with its own challenges.
If we were to dwell a bit more on Pakistan, Professor Pant, the inclusion of the Resistance Front in the UN report comes against a backdrop of Pakistan's attempts to manipulate the language in certain UNSC documents. Now, it comes in spite of the fact that Pakistan is currently a non-permanent member of the UN Security Council. What does that tell you about Pakistan's standing in the UNSC? Is it then not a barometer of prevailing sentiment against Pakistan? Does it not mean that there are no takers for Pakistan's claims in the UNSC?
Well, it does, and I think Pakistan now has to think what kind of a leadership it wants to project through its membership, non-permanent membership of the UNSC, because there is a lot of verbiage that has been coming from Pakistan as to what it wants to do, what it intends to do, and I think there have been some in India who have been concerned about it. But I think, as this report highlights, Pakistan's case is no legs to stand on, and I think the world sees through Pakistan's shenanigans and Pakistan's proclivity in continuing to use terrorism as an instrument of state policy. It remains a challenge for the world at large, not simply India, So when India says that look, this is not simply an India-specific problem, but a global challenge, the world is listening and world is responding in its own ways. It may be slow at times, as some of us in India would want greater action, greater clarity from some member states. But I think by and large, this is a sentiment that now pervades across the international community, and Pakistan will have to rethink where it wants to go from here, because ultimately UN represents global aspirations, UN represents global consensus, and the global consensus continues to be against Pakistan on this matter.
Indeed. And finally, Professor Pant, Prime Minister Modi told Parliament on Tuesday that only 3 countries had backed Pakistan after the Pahalgam terror attack. He did not name the countries, but the unmistakable reference was to China, Turkey and Azerbaijan. What explains China's stand or behavior, and how should India respond to or counter this China-Pakistan dynamic?
So I think this is certainly, Ramesh, a big problem for India, because China continues to be the most important backer of Pakistan at this point. And if you see, for example, during Operation Sindoor, the kind of coordination we saw between the militaries, between the two nations, I think it is a sign of things to come. India will have to be prepared for this collusion to become even stronger. But by and large, I think what India has done very well is to stand up for its own interests. So we saw, for example, during the SCO Defence Ministers Summit meeting when Indian Defence Minister refused to sign the joint statement, where once again we saw collusion between China and Pakistan in toning down the language in favor of Pakistan. So clearly, I think India is quite capable of standing up for its own interests, and I think India will push back hard and should push back hard along the issues, on those issues which matter, and terrorism is one such issue where India really can't compromise. So I do think that the way we are presenting and what the Prime Minister said in his speech to the Parliament is indicative of India's resolve to find a new modus vivendi with Pakistan on terrorism, and the strong resolve that you see now in India, that every action of Pakistan on when it comes to supporting terrorism will be met with resolute action. And that's what we saw during Operation Sindoor, and that is why it is worldwide seen as a new normal in India's response to terrorism and to Pakistani-sponsored terrorism in particular. But China will continue to be a problem, and China will continue to be a challenge.
All right. Professor Pant, pleasure as always to talk to you. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.